Welcome to the Resilient Earth podcast, where we talk with speakers from the United States and around the world about the critical issues facing our planet and the positive actions people are taking, from the tiniest of actions to the grandest of gestures, so that we can continue to thrive and survive for generations to come. I'm Leanne Lindsay, producer and host, along with co-hosts and co-producers Scott and Tree Mercer of Mendocino Whale and Seal Study, located on the South Mendocino and North Sonoma coasts. The music for this podcast is by Eric Alleman, an international composer, pianist, and writer living in the Sea Ridge. Discover more of his music, animations, ballet, stage, and film work at ericalleman.com. You can find Resilient Earth on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube, SoundCloud, and wherever you find your podcasts. In this episode, we talk with a former UC Davis design professor, Anne Savageau, about her efforts to raise awareness about plastic pollution with not only her design students, but with people around the globe through a special project she created called BAG, an acronym for Bags Across the Globe. In the early 2000s, Professor Anne Savageau created a class in design at UC Davis called Principles and Practices of Sustainability for Designers. Designers are the ones who design the products we use every day, and if they don't take into consideration what their products will do to our earth, our soil, our air, the oceans that we have, to our animals, to us, then that's a very damaging enterprise. So she wanted to raise awareness about what is happening regarding sustainability around the globe. And in doing this research, she became more and more aware of what is happening in terms of plastic pollution. And she would see it around her too, plastic bags blowing around the campus or in the fields outside the campus. She could see that plastic bags had been disked into the soil and into the crops. Then she found out that the local landfill nearby Davis, which is near Sacramento, had to pay one person $34,000 per year to pick up plastic bags because they were blowing into the surrounding wetlands where there were birds and other wildlife. We'll find out more about that during our conversation. And after her installation BAG was completed, she wanted in 2007 to collaborate with as many people in other countries as she could. In 2008, she got some help from undergraduate design majors who are in textiles and fashion to figure out how they could transform the bags into something useful, more along the lines of the way bags were created thousands of years ago. Turns out there were interior design students who had numerous design swatches for furniture that would have been tossed had they not been turned into a usable design like a bag. And the advertisers in the program had all these excess plastic banners that they were able to cut up and sew into durable, even waterproof bags. And then creates a contact list of people around the world and sends each not just one of these, but two, with 2 postcards introducing what they were doing, so that that person could send one set on to someone they knew. Thus, she doubled the impact. She ends up getting about 2 dozen bags in return from locations around the world that had also come up with creative solutions to the waste in plastic bag problem. She included these in her final installation at the UC Davis Design Museum during winter quarter of 2012. That was in January, 13 years ago. The Bags Across the Globe Project, or Project BAG, an installation composed of 1,000 plastic bags, the amount of bags back then that the average couple in California used each year. We'll talk about that and the new law about plastic bags in California, SB 1053, which goes into effect January 2026. That's coming up next on Resilient Earth Radio and Podcast. I'm Leanne Lindsay, and I have with me a great guest. This is a woman that I met at the Wallala Arts Center Art in the Redwoods as she was one of the judges, Anne Savageau, and she had joined the UC Davis Design Department, where she created a 2-course series on the principles and practices of sustainability in design. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you.
You have a beautiful background there, too. I see some of your art design in your room.
Having lived in Iran for 2 years as a child, I was always very interested in international art forms.
And that's why you ended up judging the artwork at Art in the Redwoods as well.
Yes, that was one of the reasons. I love Wallala Art Center. I think it's one of the best hidden gems on the coast, and I was happy to help out.
And I'm glad that I had a chance to talk with you and the other judge, too. And right now, we want to discuss a very critical issue, but yet some of the positive actions and what one person, yourself, has been able to do since 2007 when you started designing this course. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you and let you explain to the audience exactly some of the steps that you've taken.
Sure, I would be happy to. Yes, it was a 2-course series on, as you said, the principles and practices of sustainability for designers, which is so important because designers are the ones who design the products that we use every day. And if they don't take into consideration what their products will do to our earth and our soil, our air, that we breathe, the oceans that we have, then that's a very damaging enterprise. And I wanted to raise awareness of what is going on in terms of sustainability around the globe. So as I was doing background research, I was getting more and more aware of what was happening in terms of plastic pollution. And I saw that all around me too. I would see plastic bags blowing across the campus during a windstorm, or if I went for a walk in the fields surrounding Davis, I would see plastic bags peeking up from the soil. They were being disked into the crops. And then I learned that our local county landfill, Yolo landfill, had to pay one person $34,000 a year to pick up plastic bags all day long because they were blowing out into the surrounding wetlands where there was wildlife and birds. And I even got a photograph of a bird with a plastic bag around its neck at one point. These things are happening worldwide. And then doing some internet research, I came across the research of a veterinarian named Ulrich Werneri in Dubai. And Dr. Werneri is very concerned about the deadly effects of plastic bags on not only domesticated animals, but also wild animals like ibex. He learned that the camels and cattle and sheep and even horses probably eat the plastic bags because they have the smell of food in them. And the plastic bag does not come out the other end. It congregates in their stomachs, and because of the stomach acid and the digestion process, they form these huge accretions, which are called polybizors. They're hard, and they can be up to 60 pounds. And I contacted Dr. Vernery and told him about my project and that I wanted to publicize what was happening around the world to so many animals. And he kindly shipped one of these polybizors to me from Dubai, which I used in my installation. I'm getting ahead of myself a little. I want to mention also that the sacred cows in India, I learned, were dying by the thousands, if not millions. And then our sea animals. Turtles mistake plastic bags for jellyfish and they eat them and they die. Fish gobble up the microplastics and then it's found in their internal organs and then we eat them and we wonder why we're feeling sick. So
Microplastics is a huge issue. I'm on a plastics email list that goes out to experts and educators around the globe, and it's called the Octo Group. Anybody can look them up online and get on this list. It's really good because it does raise awareness about what people are doing, and they're all collaborating, trying to figure things out too, and sharing ways to, one professor was asking, does anybody have a good way of examining the contents of a stomach to detect for plastic? And you introduced me to Marcus Erickson, whose group is Five Gyres Institute, and they are all about studying the plastic issue and coming up with solutions. So thank you for bringing him to us, too. He has a home right here in Sea Ranch.
yes, that's right. We go back over several years or maybe even 20 years because he came to campus at least once, maybe twice to visit my students. And after my project was finished, I actually gifted the polybizor to his organization so they could use it. He has a great outreach program, and I thought that people needed to see what happened to plastic bags. So getting back to bags across the globe, and the acronym is BAG, I decided that I wanted to do a global collaborative project involving people in as many countries as I could. I began working up the concept, designing the concept really, in 2007. And then in 2008, I was able to get help from our wonderful undergraduate design majors who are in textiles and fashion. And the first step was to identify any campus waste that we could make durable, more permanent bags out of as an alternative to the plastic bag. Because after all, human beings invented bags thousands of years ago, made from animal skins or, more likely, plant fibers. So why did we suddenly abandon this tradition that had served us so well for millennia to go to a plastic bag? It was a terrible mistake on our part as human beings.
Agreed.
We had wonderful sources on campus. First of all, the interior designers, which are separate from the design department, the people who choose fabrics for things like curtains and furniture in the dormitories and the offices, etc. And they receive thousands of beautiful fabric swatches from different companies that make these. They use these fabric swatches to choose what they want for the furniture and the interiors. They were throwing them away, and they are incredibly tough because they have to be. People sit on them and use them. And they gave me wonderful swatches. And then the people who are in advertising for the university have these wonderful vinyl banners. And we were able to take the banners and cut them up and sew them into extremely durable and even waterproof bags. So out of all of this waste, which had been landfilled, came these beautiful bags. And the students were so generous with their time. They did get academic credit for it, but they put their hearts and souls into the project with me. And together we were able to make enough bags. It ended up going to over 200 people in 64 different countries around the world.
64 countries you were able to reach out to.
Yes, well, my husband is a professor and scientist, so he has been in his long career to many different countries and worked with people, either graduate students or colleagues around the world. And I have colleagues and contacts around the world as well as friends. And so together I drew up a list of people and I started sending them inquiries to see if they would be willing to participate, and many people were. So beginning in 2008 and going on into 2009 and even 2010, I started sending out bags. Now, I decided that it would be far more effective if I sent 2 bags and 2 of the postcards to each individual. Then I would double the impact. And I was able to do that.
Very
and
smart.
So many people had such beautiful responses. In fact, unbidden on my part, they would send me bags that they had made or that were available in the local markets that were made out of local recycled materials. So I got probably 24 bags from around the world that were very clever solutions to both the waste problem and the plastic bag problem. And I included that in my final installation, which was at the UC Davis Design Museum, winter quarter of 2012.
And if you're just tuning in, I wanted to let our listeners know that you're listening to the voice of Anne Savageau, and you can watch us also on YouTube. The show will remain there, so you can go back and watch it anytime. I'm Leanne Lindsay, and this is Resilient Earth Radio. And I met Anne through the Wallala Arts Center when she was out here as one of the judges for the art in the Redwoods back in September. And I really enjoyed meeting you there, Anne. But since then, just talking about this critical issue of plastics in our world, on land, in sea, in the air, in our bodies, and what can be done about it is one of the biggest issues to discuss. And there are things that we can do. It's a huge issue, but you are doing and taking all these steps over all these years. So your project was installed in UC Davis Design Museum back in 2011 or 2012?
I think it was January of 2012, yes. And for that installation, we had 2 parts. We had, first of all, the problem of plastic bag pollution and then the solution. And the solution, of course, was the Bags Across the Globe project and the global participation in it. The most dramatic element of the installation was an enormous whirlwind of plastic bags that was, I think it was 11 or 13 feet tall, and about 20 feet across at the top. And it was composed of 1,000 plastic bags, which back at that time was the number of plastic bags that the average couple in California used each year. Now, that is truly staggering to think of that. And with our population, the millions and millions of bags is just unacceptable. And of course, most of those bags, as you know, are not recycled. Yes, there are containers at some grocery stores, but a lot of that is not recycled.
As you pointed out, cloth bags have been used for thousands of years, it seems. And why change from something that is biodegradable to something that's not?
Yes, that's what I say. Well, you know, the interesting thing when I read about the history of plastic bags and their inception was that they were invented by an engineer in Sweden at a plastics company. And he was concerned because in Sweden, at least, they were using too many not reusable bags, they were using paper bags. And that was causing deforestation in Sweden at the time, back in 1965. And so he thought he was doing a good thing by inventing plastic bags. But of course, as we know, like so many of these inventions, it had unintended consequences. They caught on like wildfire in Europe, and by 1979, 80% of the bag production in Europe was plastic. And then it became very popular in the United States about the same time. And by 1982, a lot of the big companies were using plastic bags like Safeway and Kroger. Then it got worse and worse. It snowballed. And in 1997, Charles Moore of Five Gyres discovered the big gyre, the garbage patch in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And then we knew we were really in trouble.
Yes. I mean, I understand that the petrochemical companies as well want to continue this production. It's
Yes,
profitable for them.
it's very profitable. Quite a few years ago now, when California had a ballot initiative about banning plastic bags, the petrochemical companies fought it tooth and nail with big money, and it was a hard battle. I don't remember the exact result of it, but I do know that many communities have either banned or are charging for plastic bags. And at least in Davis, what I'm seeing is most people either bring their own bags or ask for paper bags now. So I think there has been a noticeable improvement, at least in California. And worldwide, though, even up to 2011, there were 1 million plastic bags being consumed every minute. Well, that is just incredible.
Plastic bags can take up to 1,000 years to break down in a landfill or in the environment. As litter, they break apart into tiny pieces that contaminate soil and water. To date, Californians have used about 19 billion plastic bags per year. On September 23, 2024, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed into law State Bill or SB 1053, which will replace current State Bill or SB 270 on January 1, 2026. All statutory and regulatory program requirements enacted by SB 270 will remain in full effect until then. January 1 of this year, 2025, stores in California can only provide pre-checkout bags made from recycled paper or compostable materials. Starting 2026, stores will only be allowed to offer recycled paper bags at the point of sale. Currently, the single-use carryout bag ban in California, SB 270, states that customers cannot receive single-use plastic carryout bags from most grocery stores, retail stores with a pharmacy, convenience stores, food marts, and liquor stores. Stores, though, cannot require customers to purchase a bag. Every store throughout California must comply with the new law coming in 2026. Every store throughout California must comply with requirements of the law SB 1053, regardless of where the store is located. If the store is in a city or county that has its own bag ordinance, however, the store may need to comply with the local requirements as well. And this again is SB 1053, which goes into effect January 1, 2026, a year from now. A list of cities and counties that have adopted bag ordinances is available at this website, calrecycle.ca.gov/plastics/carryout bag. This page may or may not contain every local jurisdiction in California with an ordinance that restricts or prohibits the use of certain bags. The recommendation is to check with your local city or county authority to verify whether your city or county has its own bag ban ordinance that is in effect. More information on which stores must abide by the bag ban can be found in the statute. The link to that text is in our podcast description. If you're uncertain whether a particular business meets the definition of store as provided in the statute, the recommendation is that you should consult with an attorney. Statutory requirements for reusable grocery bags vary based on the kind of material used to make the bags. Again, for more information, see calrecycle.ca.gov or just search online for California Plastic Bag Statute SB 1053. Now back to my conversation with Anne Savageau. Describe some of the things that you're doing right now.
I have retired, but the bag project went on from the Design Museum to be featured in SOFA Chicago. SOFA means Sculptural Objects and Functional Art. And it is an enormous international art fair that takes place in Chicago every year in November. And at the time, I don't know if they still have the program, but at the time they had a program where they would invite either single artists or groups of art students to submit projects. And I was invited to display the bag project there. Now, I didn't have the means to create the big whirlwind of bags. So instead, I created a giant plastic model of a plastic bag. It was, I think, 11 feet tall and 7 feet across, and it looked exactly like a plastic bag. And we hung it at 30 feet up in the air. And out of it, we had it giving birth to all of our sustainable bags. We had just this flood of sustainable bags coming out of it. And it was very dramatic. It was lit from the inside, so it glowed. And it was composed of 500 plastic bags, which at that time was the number of plastic bags used by a single person in a year. So it had that extra symbolic meaning to it, too. SOFA it's only for about 4 days, but it's attended by tens of thousands of people. So it got really good coverage. And then I was invited by UC Davis to do a display of bag at the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. on the Capitol Mall. That also attracts tens of thousands of visitors. There, we did not have any kind of whirlwind because we were in a tent, but we did have the polybizor, the poor camel that died because of this polybizor, or at least maybe I'm hoping it can look down from heaven and see that what caused its death is actually causing some good now.
Well, you're
That
taking
was,
a bad situation and doing something positive with it to
yeah.
generate the awareness. I do want to bring up this issue of the new California law. It's going into place in 2026 January. And the reason why it had failed before is because it was undermined by the pandemic. Back then, we'd all begun to really get into a new habit of bringing our bags in, but then they wouldn't let you bring the bags into the store during the pandemic. And it kind of undid what we had just begun to make as a habit of bringing in cloth bags to the store. I know it happened to me, so I had to retrain myself to start bringing those cloth bags back in. There are so many bags that end up in the landfills. California dumped 231,000 tons of plastic grocery and merchandise bags in landfills in 2021.
Oh,
And and there,
tragedy.
it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
And nearly 100,000 more tons happened in 2018. So you can see how it's increasing. And it brings up ExxonMobil, which we had talked about the petrochemical companies before. There's 12 states that have banned plastic bags so far: Colorado, Rhode Island, some restrictions in California, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Maine, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington. The same week that California's new ban became law, the state opened another front in its battle with plastic waste by filing a lawsuit against ExxonMobil. And that became big news because they had been deceiving the public to convince us that plastic recycling could solve the plastic waste and pollution crises when they clearly knew it wasn't possible.
Right.
I had to interject some of that information there.
No, that what you said is very important information. It has been an uphill battle because they have unlimited funds and the state is doing the right thing. And it is really wonderful news for all of us. We can endure another year of this. It's too bad we have to, but at least yeah, we're certain that it will happen in January of 2026. So
And
that's great news.
And we can all start taking those steps again to bring our cloth bags in and not use the paper bags, because that's also another concept we began to fall back into. Well, I'm not using plastic, I'm using paper, which is biodegradable, but we forget or we don't remember what it's doing to our forests, and we need our forests to
Yes.
absorb the carbon we produce.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's right. I would like to see on every paper bag a fact or facts printed about how many trees are destroyed in order to make paper bags. That would maybe give people a
Pause.
pause because out of sight, out of mind. And this is one of the biggest problems that we have. If it's not right there in front of us, directly affecting us, then we don't think about it. I used to take my students on a field trip. They had to go to the recycling center here and see how that was run. And that was absolutely shocking to them. They had no idea what went on in a recycling center because it's closed to the general public. And then from the recycling center, we went on to the yellow landfill to see this giant mountain of refuse. And on top of it, there are bulldozers bulldozing giant masses of garbage and trash and then covering it over with dirt. And all the time, hundreds of seagulls are circling around and grabbing morsels to eat. It's an apocalyptic kind of thing. And the smell of it, the odor of it, it's just incredible. I think everybody in the world should have to visit a landfill
You just
before.
read my mind. I was just thinking, this is great. I think this should be taught in every school, every university, that they do these tours and they see how it is done. In fact, in
Yes.
leadership courses that they also do, I took a leadership course in Mendocino County, Leadership Mendocino, it's called. You go around to the different aspects of your county to see how everything operates. Well, recycling should be a big part of that,
Yes, it should. It
right?
really, yes. Bringing up landfills, do I have a few minutes to tell you about a very interesting company or not?
Yes, you do. I also want to find out some of the latest solutions today for plastics. And I do want to find out some things about design, what's being taught about design these days.
Oh, which one would you like to cover first?
The one that you were just about to go into.
I wanted to tell you about a very novel company that's called Conserve India. I took two of our undergraduate textile and design majors there, two lovely young women, in the summer of, I think it was 2010, to serve as interns. Now, this company trains people who are in India called rag pickers. These are people at the very bottom of the economic scale who make a living by going into landfills and scavenging whatever they can find and then resell. So these are people who are working under incredibly dangerous conditions because there are no safety regulations to protect them. And I'm sure that they are exposed to many dangerous microbes at the same time. And they live in communities. Their children are there. Their children have almost no educational opportunity, but Conserve India hires them, trains them, and provides a school for their children. And what they do is they take plastic bags and they have invented a special process that heat bonds the bags together in several layers. And they make a non-woven fabric out of it, which they then design into beautiful handbags. I mean, you would never know that these handbags came from plastic bags scavenged from a dump in India. They do guitar cases, business briefcases, backpacks, you name it. They can do all kinds of beautiful things. So I would urge your listeners or your viewers to go to Conserve India's website and take a look, because that's a real success story, I think.
That's a real role model for others to be able to do similar
Yes.
projects.
Yes, we should be doing that here in the US. Do you want me to talk about the new plastic that has just been invented?
Yes, let's do that.
The results were published, if you're interested, in the journal Science in November 22nd. And this is very exciting news. This is out of a research institute in Japan. And the researchers there, I'm reading about it, it says they have a new durable, biodegradable plastic that breaks down in seawater, offering a potential solution to the microplastic pollution. And this material is based on something called supramolecular structures, and it can be tailored to different uses and is fully recyclable, enhancing its environmental benefits. So it's not only as strong as conventional plastics, but it's also biodegradable. And by addressing this issue, it holds the potential to significantly reduce the microplastic pollution in our environment.
So when it breaks down, it's not breaking down into microplastic then.
No, this is the interesting thing about supramolecular plastics. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know what that means, but it says that these are polymers with structures held together by reversible interactions. So you can reverse the interaction and break it down into its original components. What is so interesting is that these components, which are called monomers or single molecules, can be metabolized by bacteria that ensure that they're biodegradable once it's dissolved into those components. So it is just so exciting.
And this was from Science?
Yes, the journal Science, November 22nd, if anybody wants to look at it. Now, the interesting thing is that this new type of plastic is very versatile. It can be customized to need, and it can be hard and scratch resistant. It can have rubber silicone-like properties. It can have strong weight-bearing properties, or it can have low tensile flexible properties. So all of those are possible. So it can meet a whole array of needs that for industry, which is extremely important that it meet all of those kinds of needs. So in the soil, they put it to a test. It degraded completely over the course of just 10 days, which is super fast.
That is. I was hearing Marcus Erickson of Five Gyres who was talking about he'd go back to certain installations to see what would break down and would take sometimes months. So that's fast.
But the interesting thing, the kicker, is that it also supplies the soil with phosphorus and nitrogen that are similar to a fertilizer. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, this is just extraordinary news.
It is extraordinary. Now, where does the material come from? That's what I'm not understanding.
Well, it is called a supramolecular plastic.
After we recorded this interview, our research led to a December 17, 2024 article from the UK-based Zero Carbon Academy titled Bye Bye Microplastics. Japanese researchers create revolutionary plastic which dissolves in salt water. But before I read from that article, it's important to understand what a monomer is in scientific terms. A monomer is a small molecule or atom that bonds with other monomers to form a larger molecule called a polymer. Now here's what the Zero Carbon Academy article says. Researchers at the Riken Center for Emergent Matter Science in Japan have developed a groundbreaking new plastic which is not only biodegradable, but able to fully break down in seawater. The new plastics have been created by combining two ionic monomers that form cross-linked salt bridges, which provide strength and flexibility. Initial tests combined a common food additive, and both components can be metabolized by bacteria, ensuring biodegradability once the plastic is dissolved into its components. The researchers found that in soil, sheets of the new plastic degraded completely over the course of 10 days, supplying the soil with phosphorus and nitrogen similar to fertilizer. Using this method, the team at Riken was able to generate plastics that had varying degrees of hardnesses and tensile strength, finding all were comparable or in some cases better than conventional plastics. This means that the new type of plastic can be customized to meet demand: hard scratch-resistant plastics, rubber silicone-like plastics, strong weight-bearing plastics, or low-tensile flexible plastics are all possible. The material has been designed as a potential alternative to traditional plastics, which are non-sustainable and harm the environment, particularly oceans, where current biodegradable plastics such as PLA cannot be degraded as they are insoluble. Further benefits of the new plastics are that they are non-toxic and non-flammable, meaning no CO2 emissions. We encourage everyone to keep an eye on this new development and see where that leads towards addressing the enormous plastic problem on our planet. Thank you for listening to Resilient Earth Radio.
I do want to add that I am retired now, but another professor is taking over what I did for the students. The course that I taught emphasized the concept of cradle to cradle. And that means that anything we take from the earth has to go back into the earth in a way that is non-harmful and non-poisoning. The concept of cradle to cradle was developed by a man, an architect named William McDonough, and he thought about this concept and decided that this was really what we need to do, that any human production, consumption, and then discarding needs to be imitating what our Mother Earth already does and has already taught us. So he has developed textiles that are fully biodegradable. He has developed a paper that is biodegradable, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I'm sure that he's developed a lot of things that I don't even know of today because I haven't kept up with his research. The students were really, really receptive to this idea. And another very important concept for students is to design for disassembly. And that means that if you design anything large that has a lot of components, like our refrigerators and dishwashers and washing machines and dryers and furnaces, all of them should be designed in such a way that they can be disassembled into their component parts. And those component parts then can be safely either recycled or safely broken down in some way that doesn't harm the earth.
Much more sustainable.
Yes, that's right. And this is a big concept in Europe. It's very popular there. I don't know exactly what's happening here in the US, but we certainly need to do something like that in the US too. Instead of landfilling large appliances and machines, we really need to do this. Yes.
Yeah, machines and also even solar panels.
Yes, solar panels are a big problem. I'm assuming somebody is working on that problem. I hope so. We need to, because they are very important to our energy grid, but we can't keep landfill these things anymore. Yeah.
One encouraging thing I have seen lately on energy storage, batteries and lithium has been used so much in batteries, and there's issues with lithium like exploding and other things, but sodium is one of the ones on the horizon as a possible real solution and alternative. Salt batteries.
Wouldn't that be exciting?
Right? Much more available, less destructive to our world. Wouldn't even need to go in for cobalt and magnesium. That's a big driver for potential deep sea mining. There's a lot of potential fallout with deep sea mining, disturbing our ocean floors that has been sequestering carbon for millions of years.
Making an excellent point. All of these things are on the horizon, and the emerging field of environmental engineering is exciting. I think there are a lot of young people who are so concerned about what is happening today that they are choosing majors that teach them the expertise to address these really large problems that we have now. To me, that gives me real hope for the future. Things are looking pretty bad, but there's progress just around the corner, and there's going to be a giant flowering of new possibilities for saving the planet.
That's so encouraging to hear, because it is our next generations who are handling these issues. And as a former professor at UC Davis, can you advise some of the parents and young people out there, universities that are teaching some of these new sustainable ways?
Yes, I would encourage any high school students before they declare a major in college to really do some research. Find out what kinds of majors are available in various colleges before they accept an invitation to go there. Really, the only way to do that is to do an internet search on hot topics of interest in environmental problems. And whether it is fashion, textiles, there are now being invented out of the aloe plant that are fully biodegradable. You can imagine aloe instead of cotton. You don't have to have pesticides. It's tough. You don't have to have a lot of water. There are so many ways of agriculture, new perennial plants being developed by the Land Institute. The Land Institute is incredible. They've invented Kernza, which is this perennial crop that has roots that go down 12 feet deep. So it can withstand drought, and you don't have to disc up the soil every year, destroying all the microbial communities. So all of these things are just incredible and should give us cause for hope. I come from a long line of farmers, and even though I don't live on a farm, I'm very interested in what's happening, and I'm really hoping that more young people with progressive views will go into agriculture and start developing some wonderful solutions for us.
Well, Anne, I think that's going to be a good way to end our show today, but I wanted to give you maybe another 60 seconds to summarize some of the things you'd like to leave with our audience.
Well, thank you. Clearly, in your daily life, please try to think about where all the products that you use and discard, where they're going. They're not just going out there in the atmosphere and disappearing. They do go to some place on the earth and something happens to them. So if you could always ask yourself, now, when I buy this and then I discard it, is it going to add to the pollution overload of the earth? And do I really need it then? I think that's really important.
Yes, and I think it'd be great for our manufacturers to be looking for these solutions to wrap products in for the store that are biodegradable and sustainable, like cheeses and other things that we go to buy at the store, or have a plan for recycling the waste that's there. Like in Germany, they had a plan where you could leave the materials in the store and they would recycle them there. And they had a better recycling method than we have had here in the United States. I would like to see more of that happening, so it gives us as consumers more choices.
Yes.
Because it's not so easy to go in a grocery store, and something that can keep our products fresh for as long as they can. But they're biodegradable. That's what we need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You make such a good point. The plastic wrap business is a dreadful mess. And if these new plastics were used and you knew that you could put it into your vegetable garden and it would biodegrade in 10 days, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? Oh, my goodness.
Boy, would that be a wonderful thing. All right. Well, Anne Savageau, thank you so much for joining us today from your home.
Thank you for having me.
We really appreciated having you here on Resilient Earth Radio, and I'm glad I met you at Wallala Art Center.
Thank you. It was a delight to talk to you again, Leanne.
I'll have to have you back.
Bye.
Take care. Every year, the world produces more than 400 million tons of new plastic. Plastic production could climb about 70% by 2040 without policy changes. There is an international plastics treaty currently being negotiated under the United Nations that aims to create a legally binding agreement to tackle global plastic pollution by addressing the entire life cycle of plastics. from production and design to waste management, with the goal of significantly reducing plastic waste and transitioning towards a circular economy through measures like phasing out unnecessary plastic products, improving recycling, and promoting sustainable alternatives, ultimately aiming to curb plastic pollution by 2040. However, the fifth and what was to be the final United Nations session to produce the first legally binding treaty on plastics pollution, including in the oceans, ended in an impasse late November 2024, where nations were gathered in Busan, South Korea. Negotiators agreed to resume the talks in 2025. More than 100 countries want the treaty to limit production as well as tackle cleanup and recycling, and many have said that it is essential to address chemicals of concern. But for some plastic-producing and oil and gas countries, that crosses a red line. They just could not agree to a treaty that would reduce the total plastic on Earth and put global legally binding controls on toxic chemicals used to make plastics. And for any proposal to make it into the treaty, every nation must agree to it. In a January 21, 2025 email from the UN's International Negotiating Committee, INC or Inc., the agency said it would not yet confirm the venue, time, and date for the next negotiating session, but it will be in the summer of 2025, and it will be called Inc. 5.2. When plans are confirmed, information will be available on the International Negotiating Committee's website. This information was compiled from NPR, along with information from Carl Nettleton, board member of Open Oceans Global, Charles Goddard, editorial director for Economist Impact, a division of The Economist, and Sarah Carr of the Octo Group, which stands for Open Communications for the Ocean. For more insight on these issues, we recommend you check out the Scientists Coalition for an Effective Plastics Treaty at ICAP. And that's IKHAPP, like I know happy, but it really stands for the International Knowledge Hub Against Plastic Pollution. That's IKHAPP.org. Thanks for listening to the Resilient Earth podcast, where we talk about critical issues and positive actions for our planet. Resilient Earth is produced by Planet Centric Media, a 501c3 nonprofit, and Seastorm Studios, Inc., located on the rugged North Sonoma coast of Northern California. I'm Leanne Lindsay, producer and host, along with co-hosts and co-producers Scott and Tree Mercer of Mendonoma Whale and Seal Study, located on the South Mendocino and North Sonoma coasts. The music for this podcast is by Eric Alleman, an international composer, pianist, and writer living in the Sea Ranch. Discover more of his music, animations, ballet, stage, and film work at ericalleman.com. You can find Resilient Earth on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube, SoundCloud, and wherever you find your podcasts. Please support us by subscribing or donating to our cause.